Hello and welcome to Magical Journey. And today we are talking about the Paranormal Files, number 10, Demon Possession. But before we get started with that, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, as always, I want you guys to go over and check out magicaljourney.com, which is where you can find all of the links for my social media. I believe my link tree is over there now, so you can definitely find everything linked into it. You can find ways of being able to contact me via email. You can discover how to request a reading from me, as well as finding some extra tidbits on there for live shows that I've done with other people on their podcast. And let's see what else. Oh, yeah. You can find magical merch, the merch store over there. So go over to magicaljourney.com and check it out today. Also, on there, you'll find my Facebook group and the Facebook pages for my regular podcast and for the Paranormal Files. So this show will be on the Paranormal Files page. In the group, you can find some extra stuff such as photos and articles and so forth. And yeah, there's that. And I know it's not for everybody, but I did create a Patreon, which I need to put the link for that up on my website because I haven't done that yet because I just created it. There is a listing for it in the group right now. So with the Patreon, right now, currently, there's only one tier. It is $5.50 a month. And with that Patreon, you can become a member and not only support me and help me to grow and grow, but you will find out some extra behind the scenes stuff, some extra information based on the content that I'm sharing with you guys. So you'll see extra stuff related to this podcast, the Paranormal Files, or you'll see extra stuff related to guests that I've talked to and so forth like that. So go on my Patreon site, sign up. You can also get listing like live chats and so forth like that with me as well. So there's all kinds of good extras involved with Patreon. Like I said, I know it's not for everybody, but if you can do it, then for $5.50 a month, you too can become a member of Patreon for me. All right, let's talk about possession for a moment, okay? First of all, let's talk about what possession is. So technically, there's oppression, which is kind of the first step, if you will, to possession. Oppression is when usually you have a dynamic force that's outside of the body that is doing things to bring you down, basically. This is when you start hearing the scratchings and knockings and sometimes voices. Other paranormal activity will happen around you, and it brings a sense of like almost doom and gloom, like you just know something is there and it's trying to get at you. And then ultimately wearing you down, the second stage of actual physical possession occurs, where the spirit enters the body, and that is a whole struggle in itself. So we're going to talk about America's first case of possession, documented case of possession. It took place in a small town in Illinois called Waseca, Waseca is a really small town between Danville, Illinois, and Chicago. This town is really small, but it was the site of the first documented possession in America. So, Mary Roth, as a baby, she was struck with cataleptic fits, and as she grew older, it became worse. She told her parents that she was speaking to spirits when she would have these fits. So it was, she would be in trances too with that. As a teen, she developed the ability to read books blindfolded. Yeah, it gets weirder. It really does. She would have fits for hours, and her strength would get so strong during these fits that it would take 5 men to hold her down. She started cutting herself to relieve the pressure in her head, and started hearing voices and speaking in unknown languages. So that was kind of problematic. And then her parents decided to have her committed to an asylum, where she died at the age of 19 in 1865. So here's the thing of it, though. Mary was not really content with having unalived. And so Mary decided to take on a whole new thing. So enter Lunacy Venum. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Lunacy complained of not feeling well one day and went to lay down. At the age of 13, she began having prolonged trances and seizures, and speaking in different voices. Sound familiar? She would be able to talk about details of places that she had never been to before. So she was having she would be able to give details of, houses, areas that she had never been to before, that she just would give graphic details about. And then came her really kind of shocking revelation that she had been talking to the spirits of 2 of her deceased siblings. The doctors had asked her parents to put her into an asylum, but her parents refused. They were like, "We're not putting our daughter into an asylum. Are you crazy?" But so all of these things were going on. There was no real good answer for what was happening. But Mary's parents found out about all of this, and they were like, this sounds very similar to how our daughter was acting. So the parents wanted to meet Lunacy, and they did. And when they met with her, she'd been introducing herself as different people, like a German woman, a little boy, a lot of different people that she was introducing herself with. But when Mary's parents came around, Mary's dad, Lunacy introduced herself as Mary. Now, here's where the story gets very interesting. Lunacy was actually described Mary's house. She knew where Mary's room was at. When she went to the house, um, she identified and recognized different things that belonged to Mary. It was really, really weird. And so Mary's parents decided to ask her to move into the house, which she did for several months. And she even went as far as going to meet and visit with several of Mary's friends. And this went on for a while. And the and Mary's family was like literally treating this girl like their daughter, their lost daughter, the one who had passed. But eventually, though, Mary informed the Roths that Lunacy spirit had healed and she would be returning soon. Eventually, Mary relinquished the body of Lunacy back over to her, the girl, and Lunacy returned to a relatively normal life. This particular type of possession is quite different than what we normally hear about. This is a spirit possessing, like the spirit of someone who is passed, possessing the body of someone who is still living. Normally, what we hear about are possessions where malevolent spirits are involved, and demon possession basically is what we normally hear about, which is kind of where we go to next. So the story of Ronald Doe, who was his name was actually Ronald Edward Hunkler. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. He was born in 1935. So Ronald Hunkler, he worked for NASA as an engineer in later years, and was frequently concerned about people finding out that he was the person who inspired the story of The Exorcist. So he did a lot of trying to evade the situation. He was always worried that his colleagues would find out, and it would cause him a lot of ridicule and possibly lose his job. So, and he would also do things like leave his house on Halloween because he didn't want people to know, find out that that was him. There was just a lot of precautions he would take all the time. But at the age of 14, he began experiencing paranormal activity, like knocking and scratching sounds behind his bedroom wall. Chairs would move with the boy in them and throw him out. His bed shook. The floors were scarred in the house from heavy furniture moving across them. And there was a picture of Jesus that shook every time the boy was around it. So there was a lot of paranormal activity that began to happen around the boy. It was just kind of like the movie depicted. It was just like a very foreboding situation. So Enter William Bounder. Yeah, who was a Jesuit exorcist. Now, Bounder, he got a hold of the boy, discovered, like, he went through the whole situation with trying to because in order for the church to sanction an exorcism, there has to be proof. There has to be evidence of the possession. The the boy entered a trance-like state during exorcisms. There would be scratching sounds that would kind of beat out the rhythm of marching soldiers. St. Margaret Mary's relic was thrown on the floor. The safety pin was open on the relic, and nobody had opened it. And Ronald reacted in sheer fear and terror whenever the relic was thrown. They relocated Ronald to St. Louis. Now, some things happened as a result of this. Apparently, the demon that had possessed the boy was very okay with moving to St. Louis for whatever reason. The words Louis was written on his ribs in deep red scratches. There was a question as to when they would move the child to the hospital, and the word Saturday got scratched into his hip. Sort of like in the movie where Help Me appeared on her stomach. And then there was a question about the duration of time that they would spend at the hospital. And the words 3.5 weeks became printed on his chest. Again, very similar to the movie. So there was all of this really crazy, just weird paranormal stuff happening. Again, furniture moving, bed shaking, pictures shaking on the wall, that kind of thing. On March 19th, 1949, March 21st, sorry, 1949, the boy was admitted to Alexson Brothers Hospital. What it is with me and names, I honestly don't. About a month later, as the exorcism became full-fledged, the boy began screaming, cursing, using Latin phrases as the priest began casting out the demons. And eventually, obviously, the priest won, and the demons were cast out, and Ronald led a relatively normal life. Like I said, he wound up going to working at NASA as an engineer. He was instrumental in helping with the Apollo program and so forth. So all in all, he did lead a relatively normal life. However, he also died in 2020 at the age of 86. And so thus ends the story of the Exorcist boy, as he was known. So these are two major documented cases of possession here in America. And one of the things I want to point out here is that, you know, exorcism, a lot of people, you know, have a lot of interesting beliefs about exorcism. You know, the family that lived in the demon house in Gary, Indiana, claimed to be possessed, and there were several things done to try to, you know, alleviate that. I believe at one point, one of the children actually climbed up a wall backwards and flipped over his grandmother's head while she was holding his hand. And he landed on his feet and still had hold of her hands. And the people who, like one of the DCFS uh, people and a nurse, both kind of flipped out and left the room. And they were like, this couldn't possibly happen. But you know, apparently, though, they underwent their thing and became demon free. Eventually, the demon house in Gary, Indiana, was tore down, and you know, and the family had moved off and so forth, and led a relatively normal life. But that's another documented case of possession. Um, with an entire family. I mean, the children were showing really bizarre signs. Yeah. So, with demon possession, with possession in general, a, a lot, like I said, there's a lot of interesting beliefs about it, a lot of misconceptions about it. Uh, is possession, you know, is it a viable thing? Does it really happen? My personal opinion is yes, people do become possessed either by, you know, spirits of people who have passed on or by other forces. And, the case of that sparked the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and it was a possession that happened to a young German girl. That was a very controversial story. You know, and she was later considered a saint. Um, People do pilgrimages to her grave because they believe that her possession was actually kind of a war between good and evil. And so, you know, and there's a lot, like you see the movie, the possession of Emily Rose. It was just a horrific experience. The priest who you know, performed that exorcism or tried to perform that exorcism did wind up doing some time in prison. That's one of the things that's really important to know, is that, like, a lot of times with these exorcisms, whether they're successful or not, you know, people do wind up going to jail sometimes. You know, people wind up getting unalived in these exorcisms. You know, I've seen people like in churches trying to perform exorcisms during altar calls and stuff like that. And it can be very scary. I mean, people like, you know, people start reacting like they are actually possessed, um, to these men who are trying to call themselves, you know, they anoint them with the oil and cast out demons and so forth, which, you know, by biblical standards, that is a legitimate thing. You know, it says that they will speak in unknown tongues and you know, pick up deadly serpents and not be harmed, and that they will, you know, heal the sick and cast out demons and that sort of thing. So, on in the biblical sense, it is accurate. But yeah, people do wind up, you know, there are failed exorcisms, and people do wind up going to jail because of that. And people do wind up losing their lives sometimes from these. So we have to be very careful in the when it comes to possession, when it comes to cases where people believe they're possessed or somebody else believes that they're possessed. And we have to accept the fact that we don't always have the truth there, boys and girls. That we may be seeing something that is, our perception may be off. That the things that we believe are happening may not really be happening, and so it's very important to be careful, to be mindful of what you're doing. It's very important to be very careful and mindful of what you're performing when you perform an exorcism, when you're like saying they're telling somebody that they're possessed, because you also have to factor in mental illnesses, physical illnesses, that sort of thing, because some of these things can be misidentified as possession. People who are prone to seizures, for instance, can be misidentified as somebody who is being possessed. Uh, People who have schizophrenia and have a psychotic episode, may speak in strange tongues, or they may, you know, act very differently and be misdiagnosed. So again, you have to be very careful when it comes to these things, and make sure that you have evidence supporting the fact. Are there paranormal activities going on around the person? If it is it poltergeist activity, or is it something different? You have to answer a few questions. Are they speaking in strange languages, or languages that they shouldn't know? Are objects moving around them? Are they showing physical signs, levitating, scratches? Are they reacting to holy water? I mean, there's a whole list of things. And one of the things that I do want to point out too, really quickly, is that, at one point, the Catholic Church actually rewrote the exorcism riot. So there's the traditional one and the modern one. And the modern one takes in consideration mental illness and so forth. So that's also very important to understand. But there you have it. I'm going to work on, do some in-depth investigation and research into the cases of possession, especially the two that I've talked about today. The Wasika Wonder, I want to dig deeper into that and see what I can find out about that. The exorcism that took place in St. Louis, that was the inspiration for the movie The Exorcist. I definitely want to dig a little deeper into that as well. And some of the other stuff that I mentioned today, such as the story that inspired the possession of Emily Rose, or the exorcism of Emily Rose. And and as I begin to bring, pull more information out about this, I'm probably going to add that to my Patreon. Just saying. And maybe throw a little bit of it out there in the group, the Facebook group. So please go over and join those. If you have not liked or shared or commented, please do so. And do not forget, if you have not subbed to my channel, definitely please do that. All of these things are free, and it helps me to grow, and it makes me a happy person. So there's that. Anyway, I appreciate you guys. I love you, and may your journey always be magical.
I've waited for so long to see when you come back to me through the wars and battles that were lost. We're born again, it's you and me. The rest is history.